The story begins with a tour guide trying to explain and show tourists the beauty of New York City. Suddenly, an armored car appears out of nowhere, mowing down everything in its path and causing destruction and chaos. The armored car is heading straight for them, and death is certain for everyone present. Luckily, Spiderman appears at the last moment and uses his webbing to change the car's course, ensuring no one is harmed. The bad news is that this isn't the only problem, because just seconds later, our hero is hit by a pickup truck driven by Frank Castle, better known as a Punisher. Frank points a grenade launcher at him and tells him to get out of his way. The time has come when he stops interfering in his affairs, whoever will harm him. But Peter decides to choose the second solution and uses the strings to block the barrel of the weapon. Unfortunately, this does not stop the projectile, and Frank shoots him directly in the chest and sends him flying in the air. He falls on the armored vehicle in front of him, and then flies onto the gasket in front of the vehicle. Frank penetrates the gasket, and I hit it with his foot with a bird outside the vehicle, and then he tells him it is better for him to go home and leave the work to heroes. And after Ben Sharp is out of equation, Spider-Man returns to chase the armored vehicle that has almost reached its goal. It appears that it is going straight to prison, imprisoned by a villain named Scorpion, who is about to be transported to another location. Peter doesn't know how to stop them from reaching the prison. He takes matters into his own hands, flipping the van and removing the doors, so the prison guards can help him arrest the criminals. But the biggest surprise is that they find a kind old woman inside the van after a few seconds. She appears as if she doesn't understand where she is or what she did. Peter notices something strange and sees a flying entity emerge from the old woman and enter the officer behind her. Then it jumps again to one of the people running outside. This happened several times until the entity reaches the helicopter transporting Scorpion, and using the officer's power, he changes the orders are given, and Scorpion is directed to another location. He then waits for Peter to appear and tries to enter his body. Fortunately, Peter manages to expel him, which greatly intrigues the entity controlling the people. This entity takes a moment and tells him that he should have checked the tank before wasting all that time chasing it. Here we see that there were very powerful explosives inside the tank, and there were only 3 seconds left before they would detonate. This creates a perfect distraction, allowing the entity to escape and leaving Peter confused. As the other people, Wolf appears a few seconds later to tell him that all of this is meaningless. I don't remember anything about what happened, nor do any of the people who acted against their will, and Peter assures her that something is controlling their minds. But she has no idea what she's doing about that. He's going to talk to a friend of his. A little later, we see him arriving at a bathroom and meeting a beautiful woman waiting in the water. She asked him to take off his suit so he can go down with her. She's in charge of communicating with him in the damage control department. She tells him that she is not sure about this issue of mind control. But there were 3 attacks last month with effects exactly like this, and there was a strange thing that caught attention at the time of the attacks. The database was hacked with 30 different accounts. The employees all searched for the same thing. B-Max had no idea what the code represented or what it meant, but strangely, everyone searched for it at the same time, with a little more information. Peter decided to go to the damage control headquarters to meet the director, a man named Bill Masker, who welcomed him into the office. They were responsible for cleaning up all the disasters he had caused that morning and might have answers to what was happening. During his tour there, Peter saw the samurai warriors he had encountered before, who used to call themselves the Hand, and were now working for damage control and had become their best security team. Peter also sees that they took advantage of the things they found in the battle society, and suddenly he realizes that they have shock absorbers, and they have made some improvements on them. They are facing an enemy that can enter people's minds and control them. He also knows that this entity tried to do this to him and failed, so he concludes his words and confesses that because of certain rules in his work, he will not be able to tell him everything that is happening, but he is certain that Peter is one of those who can help them defeat this entity, especially since no one knew how to refuse his control before him. And this is a very important thing. At the end of the day, Peter takes off his suit and goes to the cafe where MJ works. He sees her for a bit even though she has no idea who he is. Then he gets a call from Wolf telling him that Scorpion has escaped. The security guard walks into the door, but Peter is one step ahead. He's logged into the police system configured all the city's cameras, and set up his fingerprint. So they'll send an alert if he appears anywhere. Nat appears a few minutes later and tries to flirt with the cashier, even though he's doing it very badly. Peter can't help but be thrilled to see his friend doing something like that. It seems Nat is carrying a huge amount of beer, so he decided to follow him and make sure he doesn't get caught. A little while later, he arrives at a party full of strangers, but he tries to blend in and not draw attention. There he finds a wall covered with pictures of Spider-Man sightings and numerous notes about his possible identity. Someone was obsessed with uncovering the hero's secret. After a couple of seconds, a nerd appears and tries to explain the strangeness of his whiteboard. It turns out that Spider-Man saved his life and the lives of his friends several times, and ever since then, he's been obsessed with finding out who's doing this, just so he can thank him personally for everything he does. He even invented an app to track his sightings called Spider Dragger, an app everyone in town knows about. And there are many like him who want to know who's behind the mask. And his research and the suspects, when he uncovers them, it turns out it's all nonsense because the photos have a flash, and his teacher at that moment. MJ appears, and Peter can't stop staring at her. When she asked him his name, he says Mert, so he gives her the rose he was holding, hoping it will catch her attention. After a few seconds, he learns that she went to her first job interview and met the candidate as expected, but in the end, she rejected him because she doesn't want to work for a company without conscience, and she'll keep looking for another job. His friends and girlfriend have matured in a brief moment of joy, for Peter makes him happy for them. But seconds later, something shatters his world. It turns out MJ has a boyfriend, and when he sees them kissing, he's more hurt than in any battle he's ever faced. That's why it's no surprise to see Peter running to the rooftop seconds later and throwing himself into the void, hoping it's all just a nightmare. But the truth is, as he swings from his strings, he can't stop reliving all the moments he shared with her, when he swore to love her and never leave her. But all of that is in the past now, and he must accept the price of his sacrifice. After a few minutes, as he reads the letter she wrote him for the 1,000th time, he realizes that something strange is happening to his hand, and suddenly he feels intense pain. Even stranger, his eyes turn completely black. And then he faints at that moment. He has a vision of his aunt, who tries to give him advice. But when he wakes up, he finds himself almost naked in a cocoon, stretched out on the edge of a building. 2 seconds later, he falls into the void. And the strangest thing is happening right now. A thread of knitting comes out of his hand, not from his launcher, but from inside his body, just like his counterparts in other worlds do. After that, the fall isn't the worst thing for him. It's the realization that his body is changing in a strange way, and his hand is hurting him terribly. Clears throat. He tries to get back into the building to the basement. But it turns out he's not as light as a spider, and one of the neighbors spots him. Even stranger, his apartment is completely covered in cobwebs, and his computer has a lot of warnings he needs to pay attention to. After he runs some tests, the results show that a spider DNA is starting to dominate his human DNA, which should be related to the trauma he recently experienced. The computer also tells him he can't use organic threads with projectiles at the same time. In addition, his senses are becoming overly acute, which could cause him problems, and he needs to take some time to rest. His balance is restored after he places the dwarves and ignores the computer's warnings. His body rejects them, and they are propelled forward with great force. Now he has no choice but to learn to use the organic threads. But where he goes to the surface to train, his heightened senses allow him to hear even the smallest drop of water falling to the ground suddenly. Peter can hear everything happening in the city. Therefore, he almost has to learn to be a new Spider-Man. But this time in the most difficult version, his first attempt with the organic threads causes him extreme discomfort, and it takes him seconds to position his hand correctly, so it works properly suddenly. His hand begins to strings are firing everywhere like a cannon, and he can't control them, but he needs to hurry, because the city cameras have caught Scorpion attacking a building. It's time for him to get to work. When he finally manages to jump and move around the city, he discovers that these strings are much stronger than the old ones, and initial thrust causes him to crash directly into a water tank. He needs to get through this training phase quickly because the city is in trouble and needs him. At the same time, Scorpion has recovered his mechanical suit and started attacking the city's damage control headquarters to search for the VMAX, luckily. Peter appears just in time, and although his landing was very painful, he still knows how to act like a hero and fight Scorpion. But even though they have faced each other before, this Scorpion has new moves, and here he realizes that this entity is using him. And in the next attack, the villain is trying to pierce his neck. And the only thing that stops this huge needle is Peter, who will not endure forever. But here things change again, and his eyes begin to turn black again. At this moment, the computer pure, his spider DNA is beginning to take control, and Peter is gaining strength that he did not have before, but also anger that he cannot control. Not only is he able to defeat Scorpion with one hit, he also catches him by his needle. He hits the ground and thinks he hit a police car, and could have killed an innocent person. In the middle of the battle, Wolf appears after a few seconds, and you see Spider-Man hitting Scorpion without any control, until he breaks many of his bones. This entity leaves his body and leaves a man in pain, and begs him not to hurt him. The second officer in the police car is seriously injured. Seconds later, Peter's eyes return to normal. So he tries to get closer. He apologizes to them, but the investigator stops him and asks him what exactly is happening to him. Peter tells her that there's an entity like this that controls people and is looking for something called Max the Wolf. She warns him that he must return because of his nature. No matter what happens to him, you can't protect him if he harms innocent people again. The next morning, the severe headache persists, and Peter goes to university to find solution and seek help. He arrives at a lecture by Dr. Banner, an expert in controlling latent nature. After waiting for the lecture to finish, Peter approaches, but the terrible headache prevents him from putting two words together. He needs a few seconds to explain what's happening to him. He wants to know how to build the inhibitor that preserves him as a human being. Banner explains that the small device keeps him focused and prevents him from transforming into the giant that destroys everything after a few minutes of talking. Peter asks him the question that Peter is preoccupied with: whether this inhibitor can be modified to stop a different type of mutated DNA. His intelligence allows him to immediately grasp that Peter isn't just a student. In short, Peter wants to know if the inhibitor can be used to stop the harmful parts of the mutation and preserve only the beneficial traits. This is extremely dangerous and irresponsible, because nature always finds a way. At home, Peter's going crazy, trying to create his own stabilizer and customize it to his own DNA strand. He's trying to stop his outburst of anger. And moments when he loses control, the device appears to be working as expected. The levels of spider and spider DNA are supposed to drop to the balance point that they were before, and Peter decides to go to the city to do a number of experiments. Unfortunately, this does not last long, because the spider DNA in the end overcomes the stabilizer, and the device gets very hot until explodes, exactly like dwarves. Its threads turn the alley into a giant web thread, and after a few seconds, his entity appears to torture him, and they say that no matter what he does, he will not know he gets rid of the demon inside him. But he still has some passion and curiosity, especially since Peter is the only one who did not know how to control him completely, and this kept him tied to him even after he was defeated. Scorpion got rid of him and spent a few hours studying his life. Now he knows that his name is Peter Parker, that he lives alone and has powerful technological equipment in his house, but he also has someone who cares for him. This is exactly what he intends to use to grow him up and get him the VMAX. When Peter realizes that the entity knows about MJ, it grabs him with its strings, but the entity starts jumping from person to person and tells him that it challenges him to a race. The boy sees the entity starting to jump as it heads towards MJ's apartment. So he has to hurry and try to control his newfound power. Before the girl he loves falls into the hands of this entity, he loses his balance and stumbles in a wedding hall, knocking over the cake and ruining the whole party. Although things don't look right, Peter notices that the entity is right there with them. Seconds later, our hero realizes that the helicopter the newlyweds were supposed to take for their honeymoon has been hijacked by the entity. He throws the strings at it and grabs hold of the helicopter mid-flight. While still clinging to the helicopter, he asks Ivis about the entity's jumping pattern and discovers that it has a maximum range, so as long as no one else is nearby, he can trap himself inside the helicopter. He then uses his new strings, which are much stronger than before. The old one leaves a helicopter completely suspended from a large winch, as long as no one approaches within 33 feet. This entity won't be able to escape. This gives them enough time to reach MG's apartment and get her out as quickly as possible. Contrary to all expectations, MG isn't surprised to find Spider-Man in her apartment. When he tells her she's in danger and he needs to take her to safety, she believes him once they're on the roof of a building. The entity certainly won't be able to reach them. Peter doesn't have a convincing reason to explain why he got her out of her apartment, but MG is there and tells him she's sure they knew each other a long time ago. This has been driving her crazy for years. Not just what happened in Washington, but also in London and Prague, and that strange nighttime monkey thing, and the 2 chance encounters with Spider-Man. But it was like he was her bodyguard until the New York incident. In the Statue of Liberty, maybe thinks she's crazy. But she's sure there was something between them, maybe even more than that. For a long time, she felt like someone had been playing with her mind. But she's piecing things together piece by piece, and this is the only logical explanation that came to her mind. If there's any truth you can tell her, she needs to know it, because there's definitely still a part of her that remembers, and at this crucial moment, Mary Jane. She lifts the mask up to his nose and then kisses him. This kiss unlocks something in her mind, and after a few seconds, she calls him by his real name. Not the one he invented, but even though this moment could have been the happiest moment in Peter Parker's life, so far it's not real because he miscalculated. This entity is inside her body now and completely controls her. The entity inside her mind understands that there isn't a single thought of Peter Parker in her head, and this means he's delusional. If he thinks she'll remember him, he truly hates Peter. He tells him he's a monster. And if he loves something as much as he loves her, he would have understood what he did. And that's something it's unforgivable. But that's not all. MG starts walking toward the edge of the building, intending to throw herself into the void. At that precise moment, the spider's DNA takes over. Its eyes turning black, it grabs her by the neck and threatens to destroy it if it doesn't leave her alone. But she kicks in the chest and throws herself into the void. Midway through the fall, the entity releases her body and she starts screaming. A second later, Peter catches her. Despite their impact, survives. Seconds later, a man appears and Peter surrenders to his will. He tells him he'll do what they want, but please, this person reveals to him that they can enter the mind of anyone at any time, and distance doesn't matter. He'd better not do anything wrong, because they now know how to hurt him badly. The man returns a letter Mog wrote a long time ago, and they say they'll stay in touch. As the car drives away, Peter sees a girl in the back seat and asks Ives to perform a biometric scan of her face. The second thing he does is take MG to a safe place with someone who might be able to protect her. But as they approach, they activate a series of traps, and Peter's headache prevents him from keeping her safe. For a long time, Frank appears after a few seconds. Peter says he needs help and wants to repay Staten Island for his kindness. But Frank tells him this is the last time they'll think he saved his life. Frank takes him to a ship, and after a few minutes, Peter receives information from Ives, who has many pictures of the girl who was in the car. This girl has been escaping from care homes and military bases for a long time. She has incredible telepathic abilities, and her file name is Jean Grey. Currently, there are only 5 damage control headquarters left to attack. He has installed alarm systems in each headquarters. So as soon as the alarm goes off, they will know her exact location. Now he needs to work on his inhibitor, and MJ gives him the secret to activate it, because he hadn't noticed the magnetic field of his glasses. Once he removes it from the equation, the inhibitor keeps the spider DNA under control. So Peter creates a grizzly for Jean. If he can place it on her neck, he can disable her power the next morning. The headquarters alarm goes off. On the cameras, we see Jean disabling the guards and going up to Bill's office. When she sees no hope of unlocking the computer, she goes to the safe where he and the other scientists are hiding. Peter appears seconds later and prepares the inhibitor to place it on her neck, but Jean throws something at him that he knows is Dr. Banner's inhibitor. At that moment, a desk slams into him. 2 seconds later, Hulk appears and attacks him with his massive fists. Before he can kill our hero Frank, he appears and unleashes a barrage of bullets, managing to distract him just enough for Peter to catch his breath. Although bullets don't do anything to Hulk, the bombs do distract him long enough. Peter notices that Jin feels every blow Hulk takes because her mind is working overtime. So she decides to let him go and focuses her attention on Frank. She manages to control him and sends him directly to attack Peter. The worst part is that the boy couldn't control Banner and the angry version of him. Hulk finally appears, and this is news from the top market. Even though Peter is trying to put the universal stabilizer on him, Hulk isn't weak, his strength is unparalleled. Even one clap from him can destroy the entire floor. Just as Peter realizes what Frank is doing, he finds him placing explosive charges on the vault door, detonating the trigger before he can stop him. Hulk reappears and attacks again, but Peter uses his new strings to pin him to the edge of the building. Then he uses the rubble to restrain him for a few seconds. There he tries to use Choker's bat, but Hulk grabs it and smashes it like a toy. Peter, unable to defeat him, decides to call on his inner good side and reveals his identity, causing Banner to remember him. He lets himself fall so Peter can complete the rescue. Inside the vault, Jim interrogates Belle. Asking where she is clears throat, Peter appears seconds later, placing the restraint around her neck. Right behind her, Belle injects a tranquilizer into her leg and the terror ends. Jim says Sarah's name before she faints. Damage control takes Jane, and Peter immediately returns to MJ to tell her she's safe now. But he finds her holding the letter. Peter confesses his love for her and explains why he did all this. To protect her, but no matter what memories he has of her, she has none of them and is upset about what happened to him. But she doesn't love him, and it's best if he leaves. But he should tell the Truth Club. They'll be able to understand all of this. After talking to his old best friend, Peter realizes there's something strange about all of this. And maybe Bill lied to him, so he calls his communications officer and asks her to look through the files about the relationship between Jean Grey and Sarah. He discovers they're sisters, and that Peter actually handed Jean over to the people who have been holding her sister captive and experimenting on her for years. At this moment, we see a flashback to when Sarah was kidnapped from damage control, and before they could take her, she used her powers on Jane to make her walk away and save herself. Now they tied her to a chair, and Bill tells her she's been given a very valuable power. That's hard to lose. She's classified as a world-changing being, and with his help, she'll achieve that. But he doesn't tell her where Sarah is. Instead, he activates a device that starts analyzing her brain to find a way to control her. Luckily, Peter arrives at headquarters and tries to appear calm. But the guards are on the attack. He needs a few seconds to prepare, and after he straightens his body, he strikes the guards. But Bill realizes they're under attack and sends all the units, including the handsome Morai, to stop the hero, unfortunately. The device doesn't just copy brains. It destroys them while it's running. When Jem reaches her limit, she understands what VMAX means. The brand of fan above the chair she's sitting on, the one her sister must have died on. This ignites a fury within her. When Bill thinks he can turn off the device and completely subdue her power with the inhibitor, Jem shows him the incredible strength she possesses, creating a massive blast wave that pierces the entire headquarters and reaches the city suddenly. Time stops within the wave, and Frank realizes something terrible is about to happen. Back at Jean, she pulls a stabilizer from her neck, frees herself in the chair, grabs her sister's hair clip, and begins to understand. She realizes she's no longer in this world. Seconds later, she looks up and sees Peter approaching. So she sends a hand samurai to ask him what he wants. He realizes his mistake and knows what they did to her sister Jean. She doesn't need his help, and reveals that damage control will do the same to him. If he crosses a line, as they have an entire headquarters to subdue him, he's a fool if he thinks he can trust them. The ninja will attack him all at once and in a fierce way. That's why Peter is devising a plan to defeat them. In the middle of the battle, Frank calls him and tells him that almost the entire city is frozen, and people's minds are about to be erased. That's why if he was going to do something, he should do it now, but ninjas are strong and organized, and it is difficult to defeat them in a normal way. And when he faces defeat, Peter cannot stop himself from seeing all the people he lost in moments like this. So he decides to remove the inhibitor and release the spider's DNA. He is the one who takes control and unleashes a power that he did not have before, and his skin remains so hard that swords break as soon as they begin. His touch and senses remain difficult to penetrate, but his threads remain strong and fast, to the point that he creates an entire nest in an instant, catching all the ninjas and reaching Jane, who was about to kill Belle. But Peter assures her that this will not bring her back. The person who killed her, she loves him. He knows this is good. But Jane does not believe you, so she decides to enter his mind now. After she has completely controlled her power and sees that Spider-Man's losses are much greater than what she is going through, Jane begins to feel it and begins to take a hug from Annie Mae, who has the right words to make her pain less and show them that even though they are in two different camps, they are similar to each other, and this makes Jean calm down a little. But after a moment, she hears a gunshot and Peter acts to protect her and takes the bullet that Frank hid in order to end everything. The second thing that Frank sees is our hero and his friend fallen to ground in a pool of blood. She started appearing behind him, and in his last words, Peter tells her she's not alone and will find people who love her. In the next scene, we see Frank carrying Spider-Man and taking him to the hospital. Then we see all of New York City praying together for their hero to live. Luckily, Peter survived the gunshot wound thanks to Jean's help, who uses her powers to ease the pain. Frank is there as soon as Peter wakes up to apologize and tell him that someone wants to see him. Outside the hospital, thousands of people are waiting for good news. But the only thing Peter wants to do is see MJ, so Frank is hiding it from him. When he's passing by among the crowd, Frank appears wearing a mask to create a distraction. After a few days, our hero is almost recovered. Thanks to the new things happening in his body, he decides to visit the cafe, where he finds Ned and greets him with their secret high school greeting, just like what happened with Mike. He also remembers his real name. This is the end of the film.